This modular design gives beekeepers unprecedented flexibility. During nectar flows, additional supers can be added to accommodate increased honey production. During inspections, individual frames can be removed without disturbing the entire colony. And during harvesting, honey-filled frames can be extracted while leaving the brood area completely intact. Modern variations on the Langstroth design include observation windows, integrated pest management systems, and even electronic monitoring that tracks hive conditions in real time. But the fundamental principle of working with bee behaviour rather than against it remains at the heart of this revolutionary technology. Have you ever been curious about the life of a bee? From a tiny egg, they go through miraculous developmental stages to become diligent workers. Notably, the queen bee can lay up to 2,000 eggs daily, ensuring the colony's survival. This incredible reproductive rate allows bee colonies to maintain their population despite the short lifespan of worker bees, which typically live only 4 to 6 weeks during active seasons. The bee life cycle begins when the queen lays a fertilized egg for female workers or queens, or an unfertilized egg for male drones in a prepared cell within the hive. After 3 days, the egg hatches into a tiny larva that's fed constantly by nurse bees, growing to 1,500 times its original size in just 5 to 6 days. This period of exponential growth is one of the fastest in the animal kingdom. Next comes the pupal stage, where the larva is sealed in its cell with a wax cap. Inside this protected space, one of nature's most remarkable transformations takes place. The simple, grub-like larva completely reconstructs itself, developing the distinctive features we associate with adult bees. Compound eyes, 3 body segments, wings, specialized pollen collecting structures, and more. After 12 days, for workers, the fully formed adult bee chews through the wax cap and emerges to begin its role in the colony. What's fascinating is that worker bees progress through a series of jobs as they age. They begin as cell cleaners, transition to nurse bees feeding larvae, then advance to producing wax and building comb, then become food storers, and finally transition to foragers in the last phase of their short lives. The coordination of this process across tens of thousands of bees is nothing short of miraculous. Each colony maintains the precise ratio of bees at each developmental stage needed for optimal function, adjusting egg-laying rates and role transitions based on environmental conditions, available resources, and colony needs. Here's a surprising fact that might shock many people. To help bee colonies survive harsh winters when flowers are scarce, beekeepers often feed them sugar syrup. This practice has sparked controversy about the quality of honey harvested afterward. When bees consume sugar syrup rather than natural flower nectar, the resulting honey may lack the complex flavors and beneficial compounds found in purely floral honey. Some purists argue that this isn't real honey at all. This controversy runs deeper than you might think. Natural honey contains hundreds of complex compounds, enzymes, antioxidants, flavonoids, organic acids, and trace minerals that contribute to its flavor profile and health benefits. These compounds come directly from the specific flowers bees visit and the complex microbial processes that occur as bees convert nectar to honey. Sugar syrup, on the other hand, contains none of these beneficial compounds. It's simply sucrose or high fructose corn syrup and water. When bees process this syrup, the resulting product might technically meet the legal definition of honey based on sugar composition, but it lacks the phytochemical complexity that makes natural honey so unique. Commercial feeding practices vary widely across the industry. Some large-scale operations routinely harvest all honey and replace it with sugar syrup to maximize profits. More ethically minded beekeepers only feed when absolutely necessary for colony survival and ensure that any syrup is fully consumed before the next honey flow begins. how can consumers know the difference? Unfortunately, it's extremely difficult. Laboratory tests can sometimes distinguish natural honey from sugar-derived honey, but these aren't performed routinely. Your best protection is purchasing directly from local beekeepers who are transparent about their feeding practices and honey harvest timing. One small-scale beekeeper in Vermont explained his approach. "I leave at least 60 pounds of honey on each hive for winter, more than they typically need. If I need to feed, I do it in early spring when natural pollen is starting to appear, but nectar is still scarce. By the time the main honey flow begins, any supplemental feed has been completely used up. This ensures my honey is 100% flower-derived." We commonly refer to bees as livestock. But is this term truly accurate? Let's think differently. Are bees actually workers paid with the sweet flower nectar they gather themselves? Unlike traditional livestock that are bred and raised primarily for human consumption, bees maintain a unique semi-wild state, foraging freely and performing their ecological services largely on their own terms. This philosophical shift from viewing bees as passive livestock to recognizing them as active partners has profound implications for how we approach beekeeping and conservation. Traditional livestock, like cattle or chickens, have been bred over thousands of years to maximize food production, often at the expense of their natural behaviors. Their genetics, reproduction, and even daily movements are tightly controlled by humans. Honeybees, however, retain much of their wild nature. When they leave the hive to forage, they make independent decisions about where to fly, which flowers to visit, and how to communicate this information to hive mates. They've retained their natural breeding patterns, defensive behaviors, and social organization, despite thousands of years of human management. This semi-wild state creates a unique relationship between bees and beekeepers. Less like farmers controlling livestock and more like partners in a mutual endeavor. The bees receive habitat, protection from predators, and winter feeding when necessary. In exchange, humans receive pollination services and the privilege of harvesting surplus honey. As one indigenous beekeeper in Mexico told me, "We don't keep bees, we keep bee habitat. The bees do what they have always done. We simply create the conditions that allow them to thrive, and they share their abundance with us in return." This perspective shift has practical implications too. The most successful beekeepers work with bee biology rather than against it, timing their interventions to minimize disruption to the colony and respecting the complex social structures that have evolved over millions of years. The world of bees isn't all sweet honey and fragrant flowers. They're facing life-threatening challenges. Varroa mites, dangerous viruses, and especially the devastation caused by pesticides in agriculture. This is a silent collapse happening right now, and its consequences could be extremely serious. Colony collapse disorder has decimated bee populations worldwide, with some regions reporting losses of 30 to 90% of their colonies in recent years. Varroa destructor mites represent perhaps the most severe threat to honeybee survival globally. These parasites, roughly the size of a pinhead, attach themselves to bees and feed on their hemolymph, bee blood, weakening the bees and transmitting multiple viruses in the process. A heavy Varroa infestation can kill an entire colony within months if left untreated. What makes these mites particularly devastating is their reproductive cycle. Female mites enter brood cells just before they're capped, lay eggs alongside the developing bee larva, and their offspring feed on the bee as it develops. By the time the adult bee emerges, it's already infected and weakened, with multiple mites ready to spread throughout the colony. Pesticides create another deadly challenge, especially a class called neonicotinoids that have seen widespread agricultural use since the 1990s. These chemicals are particularly problematic because they're systemic, meaning they're absorbed into plant tissues and can appear in pollen and nectar even when applied much earlier in the growing season. Even at sublethal doses, neonicotinoids disrupt bees' sophisticated navigation systems, impair learning and memory, reduce fertility in queens, and weaken immune systems, making colonies more vulnerable to diseases and parasites. One study found that exposure to common pesticides reduced foraging success by 57%, creating a slow-motion collapse as colonies fail to gather sufficient resources. Climate change introduces yet another layer of threat. As temperature patterns shift, the carefully evolved synchronicity between flowering plants and bee activity becomes disrupted. Bees may emerge from winter clustering too early or too late relative to flower availability. Extreme weather events can destroy foraging opportunities at critical times, while extended droughts reduce nectar production and nutritional quality of pollen. Dr. Marla Spivak, Distinguished McKnight Professor in Entomology at the University of Minnesota, describes the situation bluntly. It's not one single factor killing bees. It's the combination of multiple stresses, parasites, pesticides, poor nutrition, and habitat loss that's created a perfect storm. Bees can handle one challenge, maybe two, but the accumulation of all these stresses simultaneously has pushed many colonies beyond their ability to recover.